I'm just going to start off
You feel it, Tim?
with the crux of my practice, which is really what I'm interested in is what holds us together in society and what pulls us apart. What is that glue that connects us and all those things that are working against that glue as well. So what I want to talk about today, I'm looking at my work a bit differently today. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I'm looking through the lens of representation and belonging. I'm not going to be very theoretical about it, but I just want to, what I've noticed in terms of representation and what that means about belonging. So when I talk about representation, I'm talking about representation of people in society, but representation of people through imagery, through text, through the media, through popular culture, and through education. And all of those, I feel like, impacts on our belonging, which in turn impacts on our identity. So, I mean, I just try and give you an example at the moment. So, at the moment, sort of China is being portrayed again as the bad guy, as the bad country. You know, it shifts and changes, right? And so at the moment, that's the portrayal in the media of China. But imagine what it's like to be a Chinese person living in the UK at the moment. How does that impact people living their everyday lives? Clearly, it has an impact on now how they may be perceived and how they themselves might feel in society. So, you know, I mean, I felt this over time as well, that my identity shifts and changes depending on prevailing narratives. And I'm really worried that post-pandemic, there will be, we expect this high unemployment, and people will be once again looking to perhaps, disappeared. Okay. So I just feel like post-pandemic, you know, people will be looking for scapegoats, and you know, there might be high unemployment, and they might be saying, well, hang on, if we didn't have immigration, then perhaps we wouldn't have this problem of high unemployment. And those things are always bubbling away from the far right, always ready to come and recirculate these narratives. And that really worries me. So, like I said, so I'm going to talk about representation and how that impacts on belonging and identity. So I'm just going to switch to PowerPoint. Okay. So I'm going to start with this. So I'm just going to talk about a little bit about imagery. So before I actually start talking about this work, I'm just going to say something really obvious. Now, when I grew up and you're like 18 years old or maybe younger than that or whatever, and you see all those men's magazines on the shelf, and all of a sudden you realize that there's never any Asian people on the front. There's never any Indians on the front. And you think to yourself, oh, okay, that thing, you know, that is something about how I am represented in society, and maybe what is desirable, what's not desirable, what deserves to be on the front of the magazine, what doesn't deserve to be on the front of the magazine. So representation is partly about absence of representation as well as representation or misrepresentation. And perhaps that's what I'm going to look at in this example, or is maybe misrepresentation. So this is a pub in Swansea called the Black Boy. It's in Calais. And this is the pub sign, as far as I'm aware, still the current pub sign on the left-hand side. Now, hopefully you can see the problem. It's clearly not a black boy. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. It's clearly not a black boy. It's a white boy. Now, you know, to me, that's kind of quite problematic. You've got this name, the Black Boy, but there's a white boy. Is it something to do with chimney sweepers? Is it something to do with coal mining? No, it's not. I managed to find the sign from 1975, which is the sign on the right, apparently still in the cellar in the Black Boy. And that was the sign then. And so what's happened here? Is it a weird act of political correctness? Something, you know, gone really strange? So I did some research. Let's just show you that. So this is research in Swansea Archives. And so there's records going back to 1700 of the Black Boy in Swansea. And what I was trying to say is that, the black presence in Swansea isn't new. We have black people in Swansea, or at least thoughts about black people in Swansea at 1700. Anyway, so what would have happened probably in that age is that a really rich landowner may have had a black servant, not a slave, a servant who may have been their coach, coach hand, and it would have been a sign of wealth. So to say you were called the black boy was like calling yourself the Ritz or something. You're just associating yourself with new money. But what I was trying to suggest is, by changing the sign to the kind of the white boy, the white boy here, we are perhaps changing our history or erasing our history. So actually, I'm more interested in the sign on the right, and actually that represents history. So anyway, so the piece of work was called Sign of the Times. It was a pub sign with both images either side. And it's just questioning, by changing things simply like imagery, we're kind of misrepresenting things. So maybe we shouldn't erase our history by changing the pub sign. Maybe we should leave it as it is. Now, I'm having to rethink my work in light of Black Lives Matter, because I suppose the other thing is, would people take offense at this sign? Is that why it was changed? So anyway, that's something I'm just thinking about at the moment. I don't know. I suppose if it caused offence, then we don't want it up. But what I do feel is that we shouldn't misrepresent history. So that's the first thing. Okay, so this is the story of Willis. So this is a story that came to me in Swansea when I was researching in Swansea Archives. Jen Wilson from Women in Jazz in Swansea Women in Jazz has also looked at this story. So I'm just that's the artwork there. So I'm just gonna stop sharing and I'll share again in a minute. So this is the artwork here. It's just a house. And so I'm talking about representation in text now. So it's just a house with a story enfolded within the house. It's a very simple piece of work, which is how stories relate to our sense of belonging, and telling stories and repeating stories and having stories in the common thinking relates to our sense of belonging. So these houses were made, they were shown at Swansea College of Art and Oxfam in Swansea, and you could just take them. And if you took them, you can make the choice to unfold them. If you did unfold them, you'd find the story of Willis. So I'm just going to read you that story. So on the 25th of January, 1833, a large American ship laden with copper ore arrived in Swansea docks. The ship was named the St. Peter and had departed from Chile. On board was a black man named Willis, who was approximately 20 years of age. Willis was a slave acting as a cook on board the St. Peter, and he heard that if he was to set foot onto Welsh soil, then he would become a free man. So he made some inquiries to the Portreeve, and the Portreeve, on receiving the request, came to the docks to see Willis really had been a slave. Unable to locate the captain, the magistrate lost no time in assuring Willis that by the laws of the land he was now emancipated. So heartfelt delight was experienced by all that were present, especially for Willis, who was for the first moment of his life felt he was a free man. Okay, so why do I think that's interesting? Well, in 1833, we knew it was wrong to enslave people, before America decided to take the same decision. So on the back of Swansea docks, probably behind Wine Street, this black man arrived as a slave. He came onto Welsh soil and became a free man. To me, it's really important to celebrate this cosmopolitan moment, this moment of emancipation. And so I feel that this story should be known, more known than it is. Again, it's really interesting for me because what I've always tried to do is think about where the local and the global intersect. Yeah, same with the Black Boy, same with the story of Willis. Where do they intersect? And one of the things I've also been interested in celebrating the cosmopolitan moment. Now, once again, with the Black Lives Matter, I'm sort of rethinking this, because a lot of people are saying, actually, there's all this focus on abolition and how, the Britain was great at abolishing slavery, but not actually that it was complicit in slavery. So again, I'm still rethinking through my work. So, okay, I'm going to share again. Okay, like I said, if you have got any questions, just put them in the chat box. Okay, so let's talk about, so we talked about representation briefly in pictures, in writing. Like I said, these are very brief. Representation in the media. So this is bang up to date. This is, you can see the date there, 24th of July. Let's just look at this. So Channel migrants, 86 people intercepted. Yeah. And at the bottom, 8 boats carrying 86 migrants have been intercepted by border force in the Channel. So to me, this says a lot straight away. You don't have to look very far. So we know what the far right looks like. We know what their narratives are. But this is just a mainstream paper. Yeah, actually, I say mainstream, it's the Express, right? So, so sometimes it's more subtle where the things that divide or pull us apart come from. So, helicopter going past. So what do I take exception to here? Firstly, the term migrant. It's used as a catch-all term for economic migrants and asylum seekers or those seeking sanctuary. And also I take exception to the word intercepted. You intercept a bomb, you intercept a torpedo, you don't intercept people, you rescue people, you save people. And then also this, if you look at the image as well, it's like a warship, isn't it? That's what it looks like. So, there's a construction here. We are managed psychologically. And other places in Europe did not use the term migrant. They did use asylum seeker or people seeking sanctuary. Yeah. And I'm sure they used the word rescued. They didn't use the word intercepted. So we are being managed. How to control, how to think about something. And I would say even the BBC will use the term migrant and the term intercepted. So, this is used widely. Okay, so let's look at this piece called Figures. What I also notice is when people talk about migration in the media, they talk about it from a geopolitical perspective, why it's happening, the push factors, the pull factors. You get all these infographics, little people, meaning numbers, little maps. And I think all of this draws away from the human narrative. Yeah. And so anyway, what you've got here is a kind of infographic that's come to life. Yeah. So I showed this at exhibition Migrant X, my first exhibition after leaving art college. So I showed at Elysium. So thanks, John, for that. And what you see is 300 figures. So it's figures in terms of number, but figures in terms of figures of people. And this was a sinking of a boat in Lampedusa, people trying to get from Africa to Europe, where 300 people died. Now, hopefully, if you look at this image, you'll see there's women there, there's children, there's babies, and so the infographics come into life. But what you might also notice, and hopefully you can see my cursor, I'm not sure if you can, but I'm just focusing on these two here. Can you see my cursor, by the way? Anyway, thank you, Shiwan. So they're attached. And what happened when they recovered the bodies, a mother had actually given birth and was still attached by the umbilical cord to her baby when they recovered the bodies. Now, obviously, if this had been a Westerner, maybe, someone, a European, this would have been huge news. But no, it was just kind of swept aside. Yeah. So, we don't get the full story from the media. What we get is the kind of top-down geopolitical. What we need is it to be balanced with the voice from below, and sometimes we do get that, but later into the story, normally you get this geopolitical kind of thing. So I'm just drifting a little bit. So these are just works I made. Thanks, Stephen, for that comment, which is Where Worlds Collide. So these are just postcards of Lampedusa. It's a holiday resort, and then just pictures of migrants. Our worlds collide. The same beaches, the same seas where we go on holiday is also where people are desperately looking for better lives. And this piece, I went to Spain with my son, and I realized that it's really difficult to be on that beach and know what's happening in that Mediterranean Sea. And so I just, a simple gesture from my part, bought some flowers and put them out to sea. And again, it's a film piece. I'm not going to show you. Film doesn't work that well on Zoom, but it's just a double play on words. Wish you were here. I mean, literally, wish you were alive, and wish you were here. A play on the postcard again. Okay, so talking more about the media, I never really know how truthfully things are represented. So when there was the jungle in Calais, the migrant camp in Calais known as the jungle, I wanted to go for myself. I wanted to know what it was all about. So this is an image of razor wire around the jungle. It was housed up to 10,000 people in Calais, and I wanted to know if the media reporting was the same as what I saw there. So this is what I saw there. So I'll talk a little bit about my journey there. So I simply got on a ferry and a coach from Victoria Station, arrived in Calais. I'd booked a very cheap hotel, and then I walked. I knew where the migrant camp was because it was on BBC News, and I decided to just walk there by myself. And as soon as I got in Calais, I saw black people in bus stops, bus shelters, and I thought, this is already, I could see visible presence of migrants. And then as I walked towards a migrant camp, I saw more and more migrants kind of walking in the opposite direction. It was the evening when I went there, and they were going to try and get to the UK by jumping onto trains and lorries and all the rest of it. And so I walked down this industrial path to the edge of town, and I went under this motorway bridge, and I can't really explain it except the amount of activity was just like a festival. There was people everywhere, and I felt very uncomfortable, and I felt a bit apprehensive. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Is something bad going to happen to me? Felt very conspicuous, lots of eyes looking at me. And then I kind of realized, I don't know, something just settled within me. I was like, these people are as nervous of me as I was of them. The far right had been in there beating people up. The police had been in there beating people up. People trafficker had there been exploiting people. They didn't know who I was. Yeah. Anyway, so that's just a little bit about that. Just some images. I'm sure you've seen these type of images before. So this is a little bit, they'd set up some shops. They'd built a church. There was an art tent run by Médecins du Monde. Obviously, resources like electricity and water were in high demand. And this is the bit that got me. Someone just carrying this massive bush. What's he doing with this bush? Well, they're cooking. And I couldn't believe 20 miles away from the south coast of England, you have people cooking, wooden fires, cooking in pots like this. You can see a water holder there. And so this guy, there's some pallets have been delivered, and these people were walking back to their tent. I offered to give them a hand. I gave them a hand, and then they invited me into their tent, and then they told me their story. So the guy in the red shirt here, he was from a place called Parachinar. It's on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. And he was telling me that when ISIS came into his village and what they did. I'm not going to go into that. But safe to say he had to leave. Yeah, and he left with six of them left, his cousin, his friends. His friend had already died trying to jump on a train to the UK. And for me, it was the first time I was able to really connect all the stories. You know, what I hear about ISIS on the news, what I hear about migrants, and just connect it all encaptured within this one person's lived experience, this lived story. And I think ever since then, I've probably not looked at media the same, and I always realised you get parts of the story, not the whole story. Okay. And then again, just some more postcard works where, again, Calais, it's the start of lots of people's holidays. You know, people are probably entering through Calais now into Europe. And so I just juxtaposed some images of the camp with the tourism images. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about representation in education. Hang on. Sorry. So this is a piece called Exam Paper. So I'm just going to talk about education a bit briefly. So, you know, what is education for? What's it, you know, what type of people are we trying to produce? Now, I don't know about you, but when I was at school, it's maths, English and science. Anything else was like off the table, you know? And I really question this. Why is maths, English and science just at the top? Well, I know why, because it links to sort of intellectual property through science and all the rest of it. But anyway, you know, the humanities have kind of really fell down the pecking order, and still, you know, they're not where they should be. You know, we clearly need a rounded education system. So what I've done here is I've just created an exam paper. Now, I know a lot of you are artists, so artists and maths don't always go well together. So if there's a shiver running down your spine from a maths paper, sorry about that. Anyway, what you've got is a maths paper with real figures in it. So, you can see Africa A, Europe B. In 2013, the number of migrants crossing was 60,000, 59,400 made it successfully, 600 died before reaching. You see the figures for 2014, and then 2015 are blanks. And then there's questions there. So you might be thinking, hang on, this is a bit, I don't know, it's designed to be jarring, do you know what I mean? And to put hard facts into a maths paper. So I should just say it's constructed to be a bit antagonistic. Anyone know this figure, how many migrants crossed from Europe, from Africa to Europe in 2015? Or want to hazard a guess? Well, it was 1,005,000. And that was largely as a result of what was happening in Syria. And so, you know, maths couldn't have predicted that. If you looked at the trend, it shouldn't be 1,005,000. 5,300 died. The proportion is lower because there was more rescue boats in there. But obviously, since then, things have changed. They're pulling the rescue boats out the Med and all the rest of it. So I've got some questions for you. This is the quiz part of the talk. So anyone know why I'm asking you these questions? Or what these questions are? Or where they're from? Yeah. Thank you.
I think it's for citizenship, the UK.
Exactly, citizenship. So this is the Life in the UK test. You have to be able to answer these questions to be able to become a citizen of the UK. Now, I picked these ones out because I couldn't confidently answer them. I have no idea what the population of the UK was in 1901. I didn't know exactly how old Big Ben was. I had a guess. I got question 3 wrong. some of them were guesses. I should just say you get multiple choice if you do have to take the paper. But, so if you don't know these answers to these questions, perhaps you should form an orderly queue to leave the UK. Obviously, I'm joking. But what I'm trying to say is, I don't know. I just don't know what this is about. It's ridiculous. And there's more about the life in the UK test where their facts are actually wrong about slavery. I've just seen recently. I just think it's nonsense. Anyway, I put that up to talk about this next piece. Yes, Angela, sorry, I'm with you as well. Sal's off too. We're all off by looks of things. So checkpoint. I'll just go into this one. Again, it's a video. I'm not going to show it to you. But what I do in this video is I do an interview with an artificial intelligence app. I had permission of the app developers to use it and video it and show it. And I ask it, it's a live performance at the time, then pre-recorded. I ask it a series of questions. Who are you? What do you want? Why are you coming to the UK? And it just comes up with answers. And then I ask it questions. I play the role of the immigration officer and then ask it questions from the life citizenship test, of which it answers most of them. However, I still decide, even though it's answered most of them, not to let her, in this case, Eve, into the civilized world, as I call it in this film. But there's a link to it. So if ever you want to watch it, you can do. But what I mean, again, was really interesting. I was working in, when I was studying, I was working in Comet and Curry's PC World, selling electricals. And some people would just come to the shop and just say, no, I don't like electricals. Just give me the simplest, the most basic. And they were really kind of like, I haven't engaged with it. I just don't want to know. It's just not me, I'm not this is for younger people and all the rest of it. And I felt like people would just brush off technology before they even attempted anything, And I guess I felt like this was an analogy with some people's approach to immigration. Before you even tried anything or tried to interact, you already said no. And so this is why I brought the two together. And this is another work called Misdirection. Again, it's another video, so I'm not going to show it to you. It's like you get those books, children get the alphabet books, A, B, C. A is for apple, B is for ball, and all the rest of it. So it's an alphabet film. And each word represents something about the language of migrants, or migration. But I thought I'm going to add new words in. I'm going to recontextualize some words, and I'm going to take some words out. Yeah. So this is one still. So when you get to letter U, the clip was undocumented. So the term is often used for migrants, undocumented migrants. I don't know. It's a weird derivation of the French. The French is sans papiers, which is without papers, but somehow it got translated to undocumented migrants. But I guess what happens, a lot of migrants destroy their papers. Anyway, so I just thought, what does this term really mean, undocumented? And I was really conscious. This is me cutting bits out of my passport. So you can see I've cut out my surname. I've cut out my date of birth, and it just goes on, and I cut more and more elements out. And I mean, I was really conscious that the only thing really separating me traveling to Calais and back and people doing it was this document, So anyway, that was U. T was toy. Again, when I went back to the camp once it was closed, they cleaned it, forensic cleaned it. No people were on site. And they tried to remove everything, but I still found some found objects. So these toys, just a reminder that, this isn't just a story about masqueraded, black men, as it was often portrayed in the Daily Mail. There was kids, there was children in these camps living in these conditions. And C was for clean. Another thing I found a lot of when I went back to the jungle was like razors, toothbrushes, toothpaste, shampoos, all the rest of it. Anything plastic seemed to stay about. And some of the letters were sounds as well. Some was found footage. So again, that's on my website if you wanted to look at the video work. Oh, I realize I'm moving very, very quickly through this work. Anyway, more time for discussion maybe. So, Nationhood, reimagining the future. So when I looked at Welsh artists and Welsh artists' work post sort of devolution, there was a lot about Ewan Barrow done a lot of work about custodial aesthetics. There's lots about Welsh identity, what it means to have a Welsh identity. Lots of people make work about post-industrialism. And I felt like a lot of the conversation had been set up in a way against English colonialism. And so, people were kind of defining themselves against English colonialism. What I was interested in is, how could Wales and the wider world, let's think about what's a Welsh international identity. Absolutely wrong word. That response to English perceived colonialism is important. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Don't forget it. But what I'm trying to say is what I wanted to do is move beyond that and thinking about Wales and the wider world. So this was the piece I made for the Eisteddfodd, the Welsh emergency blanket. So I'm just going to stop sharing again. So what you have is two things. So you have this, which is the typical Welsh blanket. So this is made in Drefar Velindre, where Emily lives, I think. And so this has been made for hundreds of years there. And, it's a very distinctive pattern. So when we think of this, what do we think of now? When I think of this, it's warm. It's quite expensive. It's not cheap. I think it's about £200 to buy one of these blankets. It's nostalgia. It's culture. It's heritage. I feel this in this alone. It says so much. And actually, as I was doing work with this, more people were telling me things about these Welsh blankets. So in the 1950s, they were saying, if you would get married, you very often receive a blanket as a present. That would be a very typical present. And also the other thing I was told, and I might not say this quite correctly, is like often women would wrap their babies up and hold them really close to them when they're working in fields, and they would say, "Oh, is your baby being brought up in the Welsh way?" And it was a way of like Angela's nodding; she knows hopefully I'm talking about holding the baby close to you, and so it's also a reminder of that. So that is what this for me, and I get all this from this blanket. I understand its language; it's really clear. And then we have that juxtaposed with the emergency blanket. So this is wrapped up. Now, I know some of you might think about the London Marathon and when you finish the race, but what I think about when I think about this blanket is migrants arriving off boats on the coast of Europe. It's the minimum. Look at that. Look at the comparison. It's the thinnest a blanket can be. This is it couldn't be any thinner. It couldn't be any less of a blanket, to be honest with you. And what I find interesting, I found this in Calais. So people had obviously taken them from wherever they've been given them, and we're still using them in Calais. And so I brought the two together. The kind of the warmth, rich of culture, and the emergency blanket. In a way to say, what kind of nation are we? We can still have our culture and our heritage and share it and be compassionate and, allow other people looking for sanctuary into Wales. And there was a thing going through the Welsh government for Wales to become a nation of sanctuary, and it has a set of policies around Wales being a nation of sanctuary, kind of just links with that. And so I'll show the work in a minute, but this is an actual piece of the work. So what you're seeing here is the pattern of the Welsh blanket printed onto an emergency blanket. So I'm going to just share again. So that's what you're seeing there. Slightly different pattern there. And that is actually at the mill in Drefwch Velindre. Bit of research I was doing. This is the jump in there. This is the process. So this is actually me on my dining room table. So each square is an individual liner cut. Each one is individually printed. It takes about a day to make a blanket. The other one you saw previously is a bit more complicated. It takes quite a while. That was the installation at Eisteddfodd. 7 blankets. And it was really interesting to get people's response to them. They were hung kind of aesthetically in a sense, but people had sort of thought about, the absence of a body. So was there a question? Sorry, I wasn't sure if someone was unmuting there. Hang on, I should see something in the chat box. Why 7 blankets? There wasn't a reason for 7, actually. I took more, and I made the space, and then I hadn't decided how it was going to be hung, and it was all open to installation. So there wasn't a reason for 7, and that's interesting you should say that, Chris, because people have been sort of asking why different things. And so what people have said is like, they're not just blankets, they're blankets with the absence of a body. So, and actually some people were saying, the ones where there's 2, it's as if like there's 2 people represents 2 people, which wasn't its intention, but people did read different things into them. Yeah, interesting you say it, Sarah. It looks like bivouacs as well. Technical process, Angela. Which printing process is lino cut. So quite straightforward lino cut. And interestingly, I've been using these inks, Caligo safe wash inks. I don't know if any printmakers here. And they produce this amazing color. But I couldn't get them to dry. And so I had to contact the printmakers. Anyway, so really interestingly, I bought these things off online from the printmaking company, and they could have been based anywhere. As it happened, they were based in Cwmbran. So anyway, they were really happy to help and solve my questions with how to dry the inks on this surface. The blankets are made from something called mylar, which is essentially a plastic. Okay. Another close-up of the installation. And then I'm going to talk to where I am at the moment with work. So this is, this slide's kind of Nationhood, Patriotism and Imperial Alliance. Kind of sounds like a book, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if any of you know, but I studied at Imperial College, my first degree, and this is the motto of Imperial College. I'm not going to say it in Latin because I can't speak any Latin, but it translates as scientific knowledge, the crowning glory, and the safeguard of empire. Anyway, every day I'd walk to college, I'd walk past the Queen's Tower, and I'd walk past these lions. And these lions have always interested me because you have lions. This is like the British lion, the Empire lion. Britannia is shown with a lion. Oh, I studied geology and paleontology. So what's interesting is, why does Britain have a lion? So if I take Trinidad's national animal is scarlet ibis, they have them. Yeah, Britain doesn't have lions. I don't think it's ever had lions. So as far as I'm aware. So I find it really interesting that it's chosen the lion as its symbol. And so, moving on to the slide, which was here to advertise the talk. I'm really excited about this. I don't know why, but well, I will tell you why. So, one, I'm excited about the British Lion. Why do we have a British Lion when we don't have them in the country? And this idea of the empire being reinforced. And so the mold itself intrigues me because, firstly, you've got the title, the British Lion, which is mythical fiction. Then you've got the word blancmange, or blancmange, as directly below that is made in England. And this idea how England or English brings words from other languages into it, as we well know. And I find that incredibly interesting. And the idea that empire was reinforced across the dinner table in the 1920s. Yeah. And so, I was saying to you really early on about we know what the far right narratives and all the rest of it. I'm not saying, but the idea that empire might be reinforced in the unlikeliest of places. And so I kind of want to talk a little bit about patriotism. And maybe this is where I begin to more dubious territory. Patriotism is an interesting thing. So if I ask my parents, are you patriotic? They're going to say, yeah, we are. It's good to be patriotic, right? But I've got a little bit of a problem with patriotism. And I'll tell you what that is, because I feel like a little bit it sets you up in opposition, and it can quickly lead to sort of jingoism. And so what happens, you're told as a young boy, you should be patriotic a country or whatever. And I think psychologically our brains do something about confirmational bias. So if you don't, I'm sorry if I'm talking and you know this already, but confirmational bias. So if I go out and buy an iPhone 11 or something like that, and I get home and then I read about another amazing phone or something like that, I'll say, that's got a better camera. I say, yeah, but my phone's got this. It's better. And you confirm what your belief is. So you're told patriotism is good, and then later on you fix all your beliefs to it. Yeah. And so like what I find is that what you have is this polarization. And so you're forced to fix things to your narrative. Now, I don't have any problem people having pride in their country, but, there's clearly shameful episodes of empire as well. And I think to move forward, we need to be able to hold both positions, have an ambivalent position, and psychologically be able to be proud and shame maybe simultaneously. And I think, if you meet someone with a kind of perfect personality, that there's something wrong. Yeah. We are more because of our inadequacies. When we acknowledge our problems, our difficulties, our troubles, and all the rest of it. And so I'm not going to tell you what work I made with this because it's not out yet. It's being shown next week. But I've made work which is really kind of questioning the empire. And so I'm reversing the colonial lens, whereas the West used to look at the colonies and put it under scrutiny and under the microscope, I'm reversing that lens and I'm putting empire under my lens and under my microscope and calling it out. And one of the things I'm trying to say, I tell you what I was asked to make work for. A couple of people got asked, I don't know why, to make some work for an online Eisteddfodd this year, yeah, and they just picked previous interests, and they said we want people to make work about post-COVID, a new world. And I think everyone was thinking this is going to have to be a really positive work, and maybe it could be, but actually my thoughts around this was to move forward, to have a better, brighter future. We need to have some ambivalent views on empire and on patriotism. And so actually, I know, I think I've gone really quite quickly through this, but hopefully that leaves a lot more time for some open discussion. Just in case, we'll have questions, but they're my Twitter and Instagram, just in case you don't follow them already. So yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. And Steve, I saw your really interesting comment there. But I don't know, it's anyone want to unmute, ask questions in the chat box?
The idea of nationalism, which is something I don't know, I fell into a little bit, as in when I moved back to Wales 20 years ago, I felt I wanted to come back to somewhere where I felt I belonged or should belong. You know, I grew up in England, but hated it, and I always wanted to come home, wherever it was. So I was born in North Wales. And I don't know what it was I was looking for, but I didn't find it. But it's a romantic idea, I feel. So I kind of you were going on about the lion, and the lion, from what I gather, was for England was a over-romanticized thing about Richard the Lionheart, Richard I. And I think they kind of were dredging up all these things along with Robin Hood and King Arthur and all that sort of stuff. And this idea of nationalism, it's a dangerous thing, and it's fake. It shouldn't really exist. You know, being a part of somewhere, coming from somewhere, it's fluid. What was Welsh 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago is different to what it is to be Welsh now, or English, or whatever. And it's something I despise, really, nationalism. It's all right for a bit of fun, football and rugby, but yeah, it's a problem, I think. Anyway, that's it.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Dan.
Okay. Yeah, go on, Anne.
Can I say something about patriotism? Because a bit like nationalism, patriotism, I think we have to, you were saying, you know, you have sort of a different, not a conflict, but a different opinion to your parents. I do think we have to bring time into this. Because what was happening when they were your age is completely different to what is happening now at this time. And you know, we are much more in the UK, much more a global community. We're much more what's the word? I've forgotten what the word is now, but anyway, that's another thing. But I do want to ask you one other thing, which I found, I did write it on the chat thing, but I don't think I put it in the right place or whatever. When you were over in Calais, did you actually talk to the migrants, and ask them why they wanted to go to the UK? Why didn't they stop in Europe? What was so attractive about the UK?
Well, the person I was speaking to had relatives in the UK and could speak really good English. You know, why would you want to go to a country where you can't speak you've got to learn the language? You've already got a kind of asset to be able to come to the UK. And they've also heard that it is a land of kind of liberation and tolerance. You know, so you know.
Well, I would agree too, to a certain. You know, we are learning, and it's a continuous process. We're not perfect, but I do think things have changed. And I'm speaking, you know, from my time in this world. When I think about, you know, when I first sort of came aware of this problem in the 1960s to now.
Angela?
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So one thought I had was I'm thinking really about the idea of nationalism, and I think for me it's really tied up with nostalgia. Svetlana Boym talks about nationalism and nostalgia as being totally imagined places. That, you know, there's this sort of drive to find something that never really existed. And I think that's the kind of, you know, the problem with it as well. I hate nationalism too, but I'm just interested in the tie-in with nostalgia and this obsession with, you know, whatever went on in the past was great. aside from that, I wanted specifically to say to Daniel, I noticed in the last two pieces of your work, you use ephemera that I would describe as domestic, the blankets and then the jelly mould. And I would like you to perhaps expand a little bit on your shift to what we might call kind of kitchen table making, which has been something that's happened a lot in lockdown, that people have had to find new ways of doing things indoors, printing on their own tables and stuff like that. But I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about working with the domestic.
I think, yeah, probably not, in the sense that wasn't the that wasn't the kind of where the work was generated from necessarily. But it's not to say I haven't thought about that. The idea that in that point in time, I say you 1920s housewife would innocuously perhaps made a British lion jelly, I find really interesting, because I don't feel that maybe that 1920s housewife would have considered herself racist. It was just the prevailing kind of norm at the time. And so, like I said, it sits in opposition to that, the big narratives, the real obvious ones. Is a kind of like, people talk about kind of microaggressions or everyday kind of racism. I feel like, this is something that pervades, it's just pervasive, and it's kind of, like I said, it just sits there. And actually, my nan had a 1950s cookbook. I can't even repeat some of the names or some of the cake in that book. It was shocking. I wish I'd cut those recipes out, because it's really interesting how much it was reinforced domestically, the evolution of empire. So, so that's about as much as I can answer you.
Yeah. I just think that it's interesting that it might be worth looking at that as a sort of, it's a representation in itself, isn't it? So it's, and
I imagine, I had been thinking a lot about, what's the word, kitchenalia, I think it is.
Yeah.
Cruet sets. I can just imagine what kind of cruet sets you can probably get.
Get on eBay.
I'm almost thinking of like everything from bunting to the whole lot. I almost thought, maybe, I'll just do a kind of intervention in a space where you just set up like an empire feast or whatever, do you know what I mean? And use those sort of innocuous items that we never thought anything about and put them on the table. So I have thought about it a bit,
Thank you.
I just wanted to add to that, Daniel, that I think a lot of those things like the jelly molds and everything else were used by maids, they weren't really things that your woman living in the slums in various cities would be using. They were actually items that were treasured and, other people made. So it wasn't quite the housewife thing that you're perhaps talking about.
Yeah, So, and actually, it's funny because that whole idea of line and class, this idea of people have lines outside their property, and it's a kind of like a spike, keeping up appearances, that hyacinth bouquet. You can imagine her having the lions outside her house as a kind of idea of kind of wealth and status. So actually, that's quite interesting.
A lot of it is propaganda tat, though, isn't it? It really is, and it's still about today, isn't it? Yeah. So it is the corporate logo of Britain PLC, whatever that is. Something about patriotism is a Latin word originally. And I think lions and stuff we take from Rome, that's all that hegemony stuff and propaganda. And I think for me, the only way now that any artist, institution, person who isn't connected to the arts has to look at things is in a post-colonial way. And it feels that there's a lot of resistance to that in just a group of kind of like friends kind of talking about someone's really, really important work. And I just think that for me, that is a line, there lines in the sand that there's a division in there. And I think that we need to relearn how we talk about this too. And I think we need to start. For me, I think we just all need to start and examine ourselves honestly, and be sensitive and be aware. And I think that we need to start having and I don't think we've got the language for it necessarily, but we can be. I'll finish. We can all be more aware and sensitive of it and our responses to it.
It's really interesting that you said about honesty. It's something I meant to mention at the education bit. I knew I was speeding by. And on the back of the Black Lives Matter, people saying we should teach Black history. And okay, go with that. And we were talking about what we learned at school. And I was, you learn about World War I and World War II, but as if like they all happened on the Western Front. Do you know what I mean? It's not a world war as in, as if it encompassed the whole world. We won't know that there was 1.3 million Indian soldiers involved in World War I, but I didn't learn that in school. And so, this honesty about, all the way through is really important. And like I said, it's this idea we've got to embrace.
There's also an idea, Dan, isn't there, that history is written largely by the winners, and it's about recognising that too, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely.
In any action is taken to actually have a broader democratic dialogue about what Britishness is, what patriotism is, what individual. We need a new paradigm. It feels to even kind of like do the thinking about this for a lot of people. And I have been trying to knock down that statue in Bristol, right, since I was about 12. Right, and I'm but we need a new reaction to these questions that people have been saying for a long time in their work, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah, oh, great.
I've got something to say. I just great discussion. I'm really loving what everyone's saying. I'm just really interested in this idea of sort of a constructed identity and a simplified identity. And I see it really clearly with English identity and Welsh identity. And it's kind of like it gets reduced down to something very, very narrow and actually quite constricting. And I just sort of wondered what your thoughts were, Daniel, about, I've been thinking a lot about white fragility and how kind of fragile white people are and how defensive. And I wonder if some of it comes from the fact that our identities as white people, or as white British people, are kind of based on these like very sort of simplified versions, very kind of very constructed. Like I don't relate to any of this stuff really, and I sort of feel like that's where some of that fragility comes from. It's like it feels really brittle, and the discussions that we've been having in Carmarthen around the Picton Monument, and I just see people being so fragile, so defensive, like they feel like if that monument comes down, something terrible is going to happen to what? To Welshness, to whiteness, to Carmarthen. It's like a really, like I don't quite understand it. Not that I'm saying I'm immune from white fragility, but I see it on a on a big scale.
I think the thing is, the whole, when people say white lives matter, that is a response to it, isn't it? It is a response saying, I'm under threat. And when you're under threat, you retreat to what you know. And what you know is all those simple identities that you were given, the lion, all the rest of it. And then some people really, that's it. That's then becomes their identity and they fix it. But it's as if hybridity, integration never happened, and as if all these things are pure. The idea that there is a British lion in itself is we don't have lions. There is no lions in Britain, so even that is, it can't be a pure thing. So even I definitely think there's something about that. It's
the semiological mechanisms of empire and power, isn't it? It is Umberto Eco, it is Gramsci, it is all that as an analysis. It is the mechanisms of power, isn't it?
Interesting you should say that, because I really worry. What I do worry about, Tim, is how do you move forward? Because some people are feeling hurt now and they're feeling pain. And I'm talking about white people, and how do you move forward with constructive dialogue and rethink that identity and move it and allow people to move along with you? And so, sorry, Tim, just one second. Is this idea of I still believe we need to acknowledge our history, but I do also believe we need to celebrate our cosmopolitan moments. One of the things when I feel we came out of Europe, I felt, because we always used it as a scapegoat, no one ever talked about some of the positives that came out of Europe. And so I just think there's two things that need to happen. And I'm just seeing a push towards, let's talk about all those episodes in history. I think that's counter. Also, along with that, to bring people along, we have to have both sides. My feeling, that is, but we
don't talk about the burgeoning anti-racist, anti-slavery movements that there were around at the time in the debate either, do we? We don't mention that actually for a long time people thought actually slavery's wrong. We don't talk about like the First World War. When we were talking about that a couple of years ago, right, there was very, very little public narrative about the opposition to the war and the war movement and the pacifist movement, and people who saw it as another example of empirical might between, and that is still not kind of included in that narrative, is it? And having bigger discussions about it like this is one way of doing it, innit? Yeah. But also, I really do believe after those big processes happen, there hasn't been an honesty or a truth and reconciliation process that we've got. Everybody's assumed it was people are saying, oh, well, that was the 80s. People in the 80s, when they were being racist, were saying, oh, that was the 60s. It's just I think to move on, Dan, we need a truth and from the white community's perspective, there needs to be a truth and reconciliation process, and in order to be able to move on from stuff, because obviously we haven't been able to move on since.
Can I add to that, Tim? I really think that we all have work to do because of our education.
Yeah.
Because reconciliation's great, but we all, it's up to us as individuals to unpack all that stuff that has led us to where we are now.
It works on very many levels, doesn't it? The tools of imperialism oppress the white, but they also oppress the gender perspective.
People speaking out. Yeah.
It stops people from doing stuff, and we need to recognise those structures. For me, stuff like an OBE, stuff like the allegiance, things like Order of the British Empire is one thing that could easily be changed in a society. We could kind of decide that we need gongs and stuff, but they don't need to be called that, do they? Yeah, and there's part and parcel of the struggle is to dismantle those structures that are in place. So that's just.
Why do people still accept them, though?
I don't know, John.
Because there's no alternative, Daniel. You know, if you've given a lot in your life, I actually don't agree with them, by the way, but put in the other side.
Hey, David Bowie said no 9 times to a knighthood. That is the alternative.